Welcome both. I imagine it's been quite a busy week for you both. Obviously, the big ticket item this week has been the budget. Freddie, are you all tuckered out from covering it?
I'm cracking on. You've got to do that. This is the grind. It's a big week. It's exciting.
Welcome, Rachel.
I have not had enough coffee.
Have you managed to clear your inbox from all of the analysts and PRs who have been sending you their reactions to the budget?
No, absolutely not. And my favourite is that people who send their budget analysis like 24 hours later. It's like, yes, I'm definitely going to use this in my quick reaction to the budget.
Let's get to some listener questions. Rachel, would you like to go first? What have you got from our virtual mailbag?
So this question comes from Neil in Cambridge, who asks, Rishi Sunak and other Conservatives keep telling us that Labour will take us back to square one, either through their policies or their lack of a plan. What point in time does he want us to think of as being square one? And why does he think voters would believe that it's necessarily worse than where we are heading now? I think this is such a fascinating question because back to square one is basically Rishi Sunak's response to any question on anything like the NHS, childcare, foreign policy, the economy. It's like back to square one. Don't risk going back to square one with Labour is like the mantra. I think it's a really interesting question when square one is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sort of difficult. I mean, this is the one that they're sort of trying to stick with. The Conservatives have come up with many lines over the last year to try and attack Labour. I mean, ahead of the budget this week, analysis from the Resolution Foundation found that growth has been slower over the past 14 years than any other period of party rule in modern British history. I suppose the question is, well, does square one actually seem that bad? But let's actually get to the question. Rachel, you have a good in with the Conservatives. What is the thinking behind this? Do we have any sense of what they're actually referring to when they say square one?
So I think it's a good line, or they think it's a good line. But given that it's a Rishi Sunak line, I think they want us to think of square one being the chaos of the Liz Truss mini budget, like that kind of week-long period where it felt like the economy was literally on the brink of collapse. Pension funds were collapsing, interest rates, mortgage rates were skyrocketing, and Rishi Sunak came in to be with Jeremy Hunt. They were the grown-ups in the room, and the idea was they might not be particularly exciting, they might not be particularly inspiring, but they will slowly help the economy recover and build back our resilience. And we don't want to go back to square one, which is kind of that moment of economic crisis. Obviously, the problem with that is that Liz Truss was a Conservative Prime Minister. Even if you sort of discount the fact that the economy has not radically improved since then, there are quite a lot of Conservative MPs in the party who quite like Liz Truss, or at least they like what Liz Truss was trying to do, and they think that actually she may have been on the right track in a way that Hunt and Sunak are not. So he can't say square one is when we had this awful Prime Minister who was from my party, who's still an MP, who is, really quite influential among MPs. He can't say that is the kind of rock bottom that he's building up from. But that would be my guess. I don't know. Do you think square one's somewhere else?
No, I think you're broadly right, but I do think it's about the general economic malaise and the cost of living crisis that we've seen over the past few years. I think it's in part about Liz Truss, and we've got to remember that Number 10 have been umming and ahhing over how much to distance themselves from both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Rishi Sunak had an opportunity when he came in to say they were wrong, they've damaged the country and they've damaged the party, and I'm going to offer something different. He didn't do that at the time, in part because he was so concerned about party unity and keeping Trussites and Johnsonites on board. So he missed that opportunity, and in doing so, he was merged into the past 4 years or 14 years of Tory rule, and he wasn't able to set out his own stall. So I think he's belatedly trying to achieve that, trying to create that gap or separation between himself and Liz Truss, and also acknowledge in his eyes some of the economic improvements that have happened under his premiership, but it's too late.
It's just interesting, I suppose, because the line that normally comes before that attack on Labour of not wanting to go back to square one is that the government plan is working, that the plan is working, which I guess, Rachel, even the most ardent Tory would struggle to fully endorse that line, that the plan is working?
I think they're hoping that if they keep saying the plan is working, the plan will start working, or people will think that the plan is working. They mention inflation dropping a lot because that was one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges, that he would halve inflation. It was 10% at the time. It's now around 4%. So yes, that is happening. You can argue about how much the government is actually responsible for inflation one way or the other. But the other pledges, very little progress is being made on them, or in fact they are going in the opposite direction. So the focus is on this like one very specific figure, and also on whether the economy is growing by a very small amount as opposed to shrinking by a very small amount. But in terms of how people actually feel, living standards, the amount of money that they have in their pocket, how much things are costing, all of that, how much they feel like they're struggling, people are going to be worse off at the end of this parliament than they were at the start in 2019. And that's before you get into what things were like 14 years ago and the deterioration of public services and things like that. So it's difficult for the Conservatives to make that case, especially when it has been Conservative policies over that time that, rightly or wrongly, people blame for themselves feeling poorer.
Do you think this will have cut through, Freddie, with voters?
I was just thinking about that. Probably not. Little gets cut through. But I think it's quite a confused message. I mean, what they're essentially saying is that we've made some improvement, don't risk that. So I think that's a misunderstanding of where the public and voters are at. I think they recognise that things have got worse and there hasn't been an improvement. So the alternative for Rishi Sunak is to set out a vision of how things can be better in the future, to say, we recognise things aren't great now, this is how we're going to improve it, rather than saying, I've improved things, don't risk that. So I think, summed up in that phrase is all the problems with the Tories' electoral strategy.
I mean, looking to the election, as you sort of hinted at, Rachel, we're looking at the general economic malaise that we've had over the last 14 years. Do you sort of see that the election will sort of be a upcoming battle of the two sort of repeated lines that both parties are going with? The Tories on one hand asking, do you want to go back to square one? And Labour sort of asking a modified version of the Reagan question of, do you feel better than you did 14 years ago?
I mean, that's probably the lines that it's going to be played out on. There was this brief period at Conservative Party conference when Rishi Sunak tried to go for the kind of hope and change message, which felt very incongruous at the time. And then he sort of the next week or so, he brought back David Cameron into his cabinet. So that didn't last very long. But we've talked a lot on this podcast about how both Labour and the Conservatives are designing a policy agenda with really limited resources. They are mostly in agreement on taxes and not wanting to raise them. They're mostly in agreement on not wanting to do anything to spook the markets or to do anything too bold or too radical. And it's really going to come down to vibes, two very similar policy platforms, one of which though goes, you haven't given us a go for 14 years, maybe we could do a little bit better, and the other one that goes, please don't think about anything that we've done for the last 14 years. And that is, I think, where the difference in messaging is going to come from.
Thanks so much for watching. We'd love to know what you think. Please make sure you leave your comments below. And if you enjoyed watching this podcast, you can watch more of our videos on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe.